Thank you so much for joining us today for our Female Voices series. My name is Sim. I'm the head of content here at Unlimit, and I would absolutely love if you could introduce yourself and share some insight into your professional experience so far.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. My name is Veronica Morozova. I'm a London-based content manager, originally from Ukraine, and I've been working in the fintech sphere for about 7 years, but also freelancing, doing content for other startups as well throughout 7 years. So yeah, quite a while now.
That's amazing. So you've really like pushed yourself into the content sphere and like become like quite industry specific, which is amazing.
Yeah. It's kind of it kind of happened quite in a funny way. I had I finished a bachelor's in media communications, and I really wanted to go into journalism. And at the time, it was still kind of, magazines were still relevant back in 2012. So I really wanted to work for a magazine like Dazed and Confused, or something that covers culture and kind of, all these kinds of various topics. And then slowly things began to shift, obviously, to social media. Magazines were starting to die out a little bit. And so I was just sort of figuring out what am I going to do with this degree. So I went and did a master's. And then after my master's, I still had no idea. So I did a few internships for newspapers, like online kind of newspapers, and then shared some of my writing on my Facebook. And then a friend of a friend was looking for a social media manager, and she had just launched a little startup. She said, I love your writing. I love your style of writing. Have you ever considered doing kind of social, like online content? And I was like, well, actually, I guess that's where it's all headed. So I'm happy to give it a go. So that was my first client, and that was 8 years ago. It was very, very kind of relaxed. I had just had my son, so it actually worked really well around my schedule. I had a baby at home, and I would just kind of work in my free time, do the freelance sort of social content stuff for my clients. And then through word of mouth, I started kind of getting more clients, and then I met Emily from Vestpod, which is an online platform aimed at financially empowering women. And she had just launched her sort of startup with this really big ambition to help women specifically be more financially educated. And she needed a content writer, content manager. And we just hit it off. We got on really well. And so I've been working with her for 7 years now. Yeah. So that's quite crazy, long time. And big journey there.
Yeah, that's a phenomenal journey. And I also understand like the element around like you feel like you have one vision. I think in like content space, writing space, there's a lot of creative freedom, and there's so many avenues you can take, whether it's magazine, corporate writing, like novels, literature, anything. You can literally go in any direction. So it's wonderful that you found like your calling, even though it wasn't necessarily something you dove into with like the greatest like knowledge of purpose. Like you're like, this is exactly what I want. You found something that you are still passionate about, which is wonderful.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, it was always about working with startups. I really like working with startups because it's flexible. They also give you a lot of freedom to kind of, you're not boxed into like one specific kind of thing. They're open to hearing your thoughts and ideas. And I love that. I'd hate to feel like I'm forced to just specifically do one thing. And, with startups, I can make a suggestion, say, hey, why don't we try this format? Why don't we try this kind of series of blogs or whatever? And usually the CEOs or whoever I'm working with, the marketing managers, are open to new ideas. So so even though I was kind of sector agnostic for a while, now I'm very much kind of fintech. I just think working with startups is, I don't really see myself moving away from that. So so I'm really happy where I'm at. And fintech, I don't have a background in finance or anything. So for me, it was quite a journey. And that was actually quite helpful because, we both, at the moment, I'm working for Simple, which is a crypto company. And sometimes, I would get a bit anxious when taking on kind of new work in a sphere that I'm not 100% like, oh, I'm not an expert in this field. And, I would hear them say to me, well, actually, that's great because you'll be learning, and we need someone with a tone of voice that is approachable. So we don't actually want an expert, because experts sometimes assume that the audience know everything about the subject already. And if you're kind of newish to, obviously you have to have some core understanding of what you're talking about. That means that, you know how to communicate to people that are new to the sphere, and we want to financially educate people and not scare them away with jargon and stuff. So that's kind of how I started off with Vestbot. Now, obviously, I know quite a lot about finance over 7 years, but when I started out, I was like, are you sure that, you don't want to hire someone with like a investment banking background instead of me, and she said, no, you're perfect for it. You're a woman, and you are also new to sort of investing or all these concepts, and you know how to speak to our audience. So that was also quite an interesting journey there. But yeah.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing. It sounds like it was a very supported journey, which is wonderful. And yeah, like there are so many like facets to like writing like good content. And obviously it depends on who you're writing for, the industry. There's so many like variations. But one thing that I would love to know your perception of is obviously at the moment, and for a while now, we've been seeing automation of content. It's everywhere, and now it's accessible to absolutely everyone. And it's also quite easy to spot when you're reading, especially when you are a writer. What value, if any, do you see in the content automation space? And how can aspiring content creators leverage it for their own careers?
Sure, yeah. I mean, when it first came out, ChatGPT and all the others, there was obviously a little wave of panic going through my head. Like, will my clients just be like, oh, we're just going to save money and not, we don't need you anymore? And like, that didn't happen, thankfully, because they saw the value in what a real person can actually, a proper content manager with experience can add. So for me, I think we need to learn how to accept AI and work with AI. I do personally. I kind of view it as an assistant or an intern that can help me sort of handle some repetitive or time-consuming tasks, generating ideas if you have a bit of a writer's block. Can you please find, the latest research on XYZ, and then, can you pull out some interesting quotes from, this research? And then, it's just it just helps you sort of streamline your process. I don't use it for actually writing. Well, unless it's like some kind of bullet points from research, for example, like I said. And I think it's efficient, but it lacks a human touch. As you said, it's quite obvious when something is entirely AI generated and there wasn't an editor or writer, kind of going through it before posting. So I think the key is to see automation as a tool to enhance your work, but it's not going to replace your work, and it helps with productivity. But yeah, I think it's still your human touch is extremely important. Being able to put in a joke or two if that's the kind of content you're producing, or kind of being a bit tongue in cheek, but it's always to me very, very clear when something's been written by a human and not just generated. So yeah, it's helpful, but I don't see it replacing us quite yet, thankfully.
No, I do. I completely agree with you. I know what you mean. Like AI, when it took everything by storm, it was a bit of a space where it's like, oh my gosh, like what does that mean for the generation of sort of like human curated content, and where will that lead? But I think, like you said, a lot of organizations and even end consumers can see the benefit and the difference between both forms of content, because AI is great. And I agree with you. It's a great tool for supporting research, idea creation, but nothing will beat that human crafted angle that can really correlate it to what the end consumer needs or the tone of the business. In terms of aspiring generations and even current like content creators, it's a really great tool and asset to use for inspiration and shifting angles and doing analysis. There's a lot of opportunity and room around it, and because it's constantly evolving as well, it's something that can see like benefiting us in the long term. So thank you for sharing. I would also love to know what motivates you in your role. So how do you translate that passion for content creation into a passion as a professional for content creation?
Yeah, I think for me, it's actually seeing how my content ends up helping people. So like I said, I tend to try to work with startups that are, trying to change something, not just selling a product, right? But so for me personally, just getting feedback, for example, with Vestbod, it's been so beautiful seeing women kind of email us and say, oh my God, thank God I found your Instagram page. Thank God, I read this, I signed up to a newsletter. I finally started investing into stocks and shares. And I was so terrified before, but the way that you wrote about it, presented it, just made me feel like I'm ready to do this. I'm not, I feel empowered to do this. And thanks to your content, I was, now I'm investing and I feel much more financially confident. So I don't just kind of do it on autopilot and don't care about it. I actually really want it to make some sort of impact on our audience, whoever the client is. And so, yeah, I think it's kind of, I see content as a sort of bridge between confusion and clarity, and that's kind of what fuels my passion is, knowing that the words that I craft can empower others to take action, feel more confident, to learn something new. And I keep that passion alive by just focusing on the audience and always asking myself, how can I make this easier for them to understand? How can I take a sort of complex topic and make it a more understandable and actionable? And I think keeping like our audience at the forefront of my work, I'm able to channel my enthusiasm into creating content that is not only engaging and interesting to read, but also practical and valuable. So yeah, and it kind of keeps me on my toes because, there's always new things coming out that I can write about. And it's personally, I love learning new things myself. And then how do I kind of convey this to our audience? And obviously, as you know, as a content manager, there's always need kind of technologies, platforms, and etc. kind of popping up. Reels are such a big thing, but we're probably moving away from reels already into something else soon. And so it's always, it keeps you on your toes, like the industry. And it's, I find that quite exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I couldn't agree with you more. I think like you've summarized it really nicely, but there's also the angle of, as you said, the topics and being aware of like conversation that's happening in the industry, whatever relevant industry that you may be working in. But then there's also the facet of being aware of the technologies to create and write content as well. There's like constant evolution. And I mean, that also brings me really nicely to my next question, because being in the fintech space, we know that the industry moves incredibly quickly. There's a lot of evolution that happens very fast. And we have to be able to stay abreast of that, and almost like ahead of trend is the most ideal form of writing content. How do you like motivate yourself in the role? Because like working in the financial space, you have to be able to maintain that level of enthusiasm and passion. So how do you keep that there, especially where you're juggling multiple projects, different forms of content, different topics? There's so much going on.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, the learning kind of never stops in fintech. And every project that I work on brings a sort of fresh challenge and different perspective. So that just kind of keeps me engaged. And when I'm juggling multiple projects, I just try to break things down into manageable steps. I think, planning and time management are really crucial, especially if you're a freelance content. I mean, it's crucial for any content manager, but I'm sometimes, for example, I would have clients in different sectors at one point before I kind of solely focused on fintech. And it's like in the morning, I would have to write about like children's subscription, like a children's subscription thing. And then in the afternoon, I have to write about, Bitcoin. And then it's just like, oh my God, my brain's all over the place. So yeah, really time management, really breaking it down into kind of manageable sort of chunks throughout the day. Also knowing when, I mean, everyone is different, but knowing when you're kind of most productive and kind of trying to aim to do the like heftier tasks, for example, like when you know that you're kind of going to be at your peak of productivity. So for me, it's like early morning, because towards the end of the day, my head is a bit frazzled. So I try to put the more kind of, the more complex work in my morning routine. But again, everyone is different. It's just about like knowing yourself and knowing, how what hours of the day are kind of, work best for you. So breaking things down into smaller actionable kind of items, focusing on one thing at a time, not trying to jump from one thing to another. that prevents you from overwhelm. But also, like, I'm a big believer in really taking breaks if you need to. I mean, I know that some people, especially in fintech, is just work, 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 work. But I know that I can't produce good content unless I get adequate sleep and unless I fit in a half-hour walk during lunchtime just to get some fresh air. Because overworking for me personally, it just means the kind of quality of my work goes downhill. So yeah, definitely try to. I know it's easier said than done. Sometimes you have deadlines, and it can get crazy. And sometimes I overwork too, but I really try to avoid that so that my content's still of a high quality. And yeah, so, and also obviously feedback is what keeps me motivated. Hearing my clients say, oh, this was great, or oh, the newsletter that you crafted and we sent out, like we had such high conversion rates for our whatever our class or our product. You obviously did such a good job in the copy or whatever. That's really motivating to know that you're doing a good job. And yeah, so your team, your clients, their feedback, it really matters. And yeah, that's a big motivating factor as well.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with a lot of it as well, especially like the idea of like having to take a break and find when you're most optimized in your own writing form. For me, I don't know if it happened for you. For me, I feel like in my career, it's evolved.
Yeah.
So like university, I could only really function writing at night. And then I became like someone that was most productive in the afternoon. And now it's like mornings. It just constantly shifts.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I remember writing my dissertation until 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'm like, okay, that's never gonna happen again. So yeah, it definitely shifts.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to know what you think about in what ways do you believe that women can bring a really unique perspective to the crypto industry, and how do you think that these perspectives can drive innovation as well?
Sure. I mean, it's true. Like finance and crypto, especially, has historically always been very male dominated. And I think one of the unique qualities that women can bring to the space is a strong focus on inclusivity and community building. I think this field can sometimes feel so technical, and like an approach to inclusivity and community building is really refreshing and essential for growth. I mean, these are sort of gendered stereotypes a little bit, but women do tend to emphasize this sort of more user-centric design and problem solving. And they very much focused on ensuring that products and services are actually really accessible and beneficial to a diverse range of people. Also, financial products, again, traditionally have been designed geared towards men. And men and women, research does show that they have different approaches to finance. So, for example, women are more cautious when they're, again, this is backed by research. I know it sounds a bit gender stereotypical, but I've done quite a lot of research on this myself for Vestbot, and women tend to a bit more cautious when they're investments, whereas men are okay with kind of just higher sort of risk taking. But actually, amazingly, I'll send you a link to this research by Warwick Business School. Women actually make better investors than men. So statistically, even though they're more cautious, that kind of caution and long-term approach is actually gives them better returns if they are regular investors, whereas men are such risk takers and they kind of tend to sometimes go a bit overboard and lose more money because they're not as cautious. So bringing this kind of fresh perspective into the fintech sphere, this female perspective, is so important because we don't want to alienate half of the world's population from using financial services. And there's issues like the gender pay gap, the retirement gap, the pension gap, motherhood penalty. There's so many issues that affect women. And of course, these issues are very much systemic. But if we bring more women into the crypto and finance space, we can show them that it's okay. Like you can do this too. Like you can also invest. And obviously, if we want more women investing, if we want to start closing these gaps, we need voices on the side of finance, female voices on the side of finance to because they know what women want, how they invest, how they think, what kind of products they need. So that's kind of what that I've learned with Vestbot very much, because that was very much geared towards trying to get more women to be financially empowered. And it's yeah, like I said, it's amazing to get the feedback, oh, I'm finally investing. And it's all our team is only women, of different, kind of cultural backgrounds, and it's a beautiful team, and we have a beautiful community. So I hope to see more of that kind of thing in the world of fintech and crypto for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I couldn't agree with you more. I think there's a lot of benefit that comes from female collaboration and women being present in any space, particularly where like voices have been underrepresented previously. I think that's like the main causation behind this, because obviously both voices are always going to be important. But I think in the finance space, where we're seeing more and more presence of women, we're seeing like better team development, we're seeing like higher levels of retention in terms of employees. There's different perception, different marketing, different methodology. There's a lot of room that can help drive innovation and business success. And like you said yourself, like doing research, you read how much a phenomenal difference it makes when workspaces are more inclusive and give opportunity to everybody. So I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's luckily, we're seeing positive change. We're not quite there yet, but there's a lot of sort of venture capital funds that are fully focused on investing in female-led businesses and things like that. And it's really great to see. Momentum keeps going, and yeah.
Absolutely. So do I. And it's great because, like you said, there are so many organizations coming out now that are specifically designed to help give room to other women and bring them in, upskill them, leverage them, network them with each other. It's a really beautiful thing to see, because all this positive change will just lead to even better positive outcomes. So it'll be really exciting to see how it ends up in the next like few years as well.
Yeah, for sure. And it's being able to access information so much more easily now, being able to, for finances especially, and there's so many platforms now. You go on Instagram, that, they really get rid of the jargon, the technical side of things. And, it's not, I hate this term, but it's not bro culture-y at all. It's actually like, it's just kind of like women sharing tips and like, oh, like, oh God, I'm in debt. Like, how do I get out? Like, what did you do? And there's just there are so many great communities out there now. And yeah, it's something that I needed, to be honest, grow like in my early 20s, because I had no idea what I was doing with my finances, and it all just seemed like, oh, this is a male space, and I don't even I don't even want to go there. It seems so technical and scary. So it's great to see that, we're able to change that.
Yeah, definitely. Something I would like to ask you is more like on the content side of things. Because as you know, like when you write content, it requires a lot of collaboration with different voices, opinions, and also the quality is very subjective. Because one person could love it, another person could think it needs improving. How do you build confidence in your capabilities so that you can be someone that is like authoritative over your content and have like domination over the fact that you're like, no, this is what I've written and this is why I've written it? I think that'd be something really, really valuable for people that are aspiring to join the content space.
I think it's about, like, obviously it's easy for me to say because I've been in this for 7 years. I started out as a super anxious content writer, very self-critical. I also, I was charging very low rates because I just I didn't value myself and my work enough. And I'm just being honest here. It took a while for me to build confidence because, yeah, I was just starting out. But it was all about trusting the process and seeing the bigger picture and kind of having a clear goal in mind. Whether it's to inform the audience and to inspire the audience, and that gives you a framework to feel more confident when you know kind of what your end goal is and what you're trying to achieve with it. And then, yeah, collaboration is really important, but it's also knowing when to stand your ground. And again, this is something that I had to learn kind of over the years, because, you're hired for being a professional in your field, and someone somewhere, sometimes it happens, a client sees like some kind of trendy thing, is like, oh yeah, we need to kind of incorporate that into our content strategy. And you as a content manager can either say, yeah, it's a great idea, but if you actually don't think it's a great idea, I think it's important to feel confident enough to stand your ground and say, well, actually, why don't we try this instead? I think that just honestly, I don't have any super easy kind of tricks on how to build confidence. For me, it was just a bit of time and, feedback, feedback and seeing the results of my work. So when I see my content is resonating, is being shared, is achieving the goals, it really reinforces that I'm on the right track. So, and, I was really scared initially to kind of give my suggestions for ideas for content, or like, maybe we should restructure this, like that. But then I was just like, you know what, like, what's the worst that can happen? They just say no, and that's okay. And so when I started to kind of come up with my own ideas of what we can do and how we can format things, and it was actually like, oh wow, that's great, I didn't think of that, and that's what your job is, and that's what you're hired to do. And I think it's just, don't be afraid, not, like, as I said, what's the worst that can happen if you suggest something, or or you write a piece and they're not happy with it. You have to have a way to explain why you chose that specific tone or that specific format or whatever. Be open to criticism, but also, remember that being a content manager also requires you to be creative and think outside the box. Also a very cliche term, but and I think people, your colleagues or clients, whatever, will really appreciate you bringing new ideas to the table. I think in my experience, it's been that way anyway.
No, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think it is definitely a trial and error, and giving yourself time to build that confidence. It definitely, unless you're some sort of like Wonder Woman, which is amazing, that you just wake up and have that confidence immediately. I couldn't agree with you more. So my last question for you is a bit more like open-ended, but I would just love to give you the space and say, what message or words of encouragement would you like to share with women and girls who aspire to make their own mark in the crypto or financial industry?
Yeah, I would say don't be afraid to take up the space. We need you. The industry really needs fresh perspectives, and your ideas really matter. Even if you're not, you don't have a finance degree like I don't, there are so many ways that you can contribute, whether it's, your fresh ideas, like I said, or new ways of presenting them on social media, or however. Crypto and finance are constantly evolving, and there is no one right way to break into the space. So I think it's just important for you to bring your unique self into it, your unique perspective, your ideas. And like I said, we really very much need kind of more women in the space. And don't underestimate, your insights are so valuable. Don't be afraid to speak up, ask questions, and challenge the status quo, and you'll make it.
No, that was amazing. Thank you so much. That was like a lovely way to end it. That wraps up all my questions for you, unfortunately, and the time has flown by.
Yeah.
But I'm so grateful to you for making time to speak with me today. It was such a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, and I really hope my words resonate with any aspiring content managers, especially in fintech. It's a great space. It's like I said, it's a really exciting space, and we really appreciate women's voices in it. So good luck.